when the job is done, I will crack open a barrel of Bugmans, and we will drink until none can stand. Are you with me, lads?
All dwarves are formidable and steadfast warriors, resilient and unwavering. Dwarf regiments have been known to defeat forces numerous times their size, driven by determination and pride in their abilities. If even the common dwarf makes for such a magnificent warrior, the best of the dwarves are of a truly legendary reputation. They are the Slayers. Unmatched in combat, death personified, and some of the best fighters of the Warhammer world. Within the cold peaks of the World's Edge Mountains, the dwarves live in a tumultuous peace. Their holds are under constant threat from an untold amount of enemies, from the savage Green Tide to the scheming Skaven who live in the dark, abandoned mines of many ancient cities. Despite the constant raids and battles with their numerous enemies, the dwarves have admirably preserved much of their culture through all the years of bloodshed and loss. Most importantly, dwarves have never forgotten their sense of honor and the actions needed to uphold it. To a dwarf, honor is everything. When a dwarf suffers a terrible loss, such as failure to uphold an oath or the loss of a loved one, they can become obsessed with the matter. At that point, there are only two options for them: to live the rest of their lives as dishonorable wretches, or take upon the Slayer Oath. In times past, the dwarf king Baragor lost his daughter when she was on her way to marry the son of the High King of Kara's Karak. It is said she was killed by a dragon. This terrible loss ultimately drove him to become a slayer, bound to seek out death by fighting the largest and most powerful of monsters. However, being a king, his responsibilities could not be put aside. He was conflicted between two oaths, one that required him to rule and protect his people, and the other that required him to go out and seek death. After coming to reason, he found a way to fulfill both commitments. Unable to seek out death himself, King Baragor built the Shrine of the Slayers in Karak Kadrin, creating a haven for the Slayer cult, and becoming himself the first Slayer King. Those dwarves who join the Slayer cult have been brought to this decision by a heavy burden they seek to free themselves from. They search for a new purpose or bond in life to replace that which they lost. All Slayers have made an oath to renounce everything they hold dear and seek to hew down the mightiest opposition they can find in search of a worthy doom to liberate themselves from whatever shame they carry. The Slayer Oath is an incredibly serious commitment that can never be broken. Every dwarf who seeks to take the vow as a Slayer must journey to the shrine of Grimnir atop the peak of Karak Kadrin, also known as the Slayer Keep. There, they relinquish all their possessions save their axes. The dwarves must shave their head, except for a solitary crest colored with orange pigments and dyes, and doused in pig fat and oils. Then they carve their name into a stone column upon which all other slayers already have carved theirs. With this done, they take a vow to seek out the most dangerous and fearsome creatures they may find, entering a life of self-imposed exile. They seek to die honorable deaths worthy of sagas and redeem themselves. The Slayers are constantly attempting to accomplish impossible deeds to meet their ends in the most glorious way possible. They are known to fight monsters and creatures many times bigger and stronger than them.
At last! Enough of this larking about, lads! It is time to arm ourselves, to act like Slayers, and bring death to the Urks, and especially those sniveling Groby. I wish to cleanse myself in battle. Once I have cleaned my soul of the subterfuge, then I will wear the honorable cloak of Fritzgar again. Now, my throng, ready your shield walls. Bring the oath stones. Let us drink all before us.
Few survive their first battle, and even fewer survive the subsequent battles. But the more battles a warrior fights, the harder they are to slay. As such, the Slayers who are left alive are molded into grand fighters. But they are not free of their vow, despite their unmatched skill. They must still attempt to find a foe who would be their equal and fight them with all their might, to try to attain an honorable death that would free them from their vow. Such is their destiny.
Now we move! Charge for the honor of all kadrin! Charge for your king! Charge for the Slayer crown! Charge!
Within the cold city of Kadrin rules Ungrim Ironfist, last of the Slayer Kings, last son of the Drakebeard's clan, and slayer of all variety of monsters. Ever since King Baragor of the Drakebeard clan made the vow that every king of Kadrin in the Ironfist line is to take the Slayer Oath, there have been 6 other Dwarf Slayer kings. They all bore the helmet known as the Slayer Crown, and all took the name Ungrim, meaning Oathbound, the most famous of whom is the last. As Ungrim's only son Garagrim was slain in battle, Ungrim is now without a direct heir, and thus he is likely to be the last Slayer King. While he cannot seek death in a typical Slayer fashion, Ungrim Ironfist is a restless and brutal warrior, leading throngs of dwarves into battle against ogres, goblins, orcs, and whatever horrors lie above or below the mountain valleys. From ferocious dragons to hordes of trolls and ogres, there are few foes that Ungrim has not yet slain. Much like an experienced slayer grows more difficult to defeat with every fight won, an experienced leader is more difficult to defeat with every battle won. And so Ungrim has developed a reputation to be unmatched in single combat as well as on the battlefield. His proficiency in waging war means his sight in the battlefield brings fear into the hearts of his mortal enemies, and his vast experience and abilities lead his warriors to victory even in the face of overwhelming odds. Among Ungrim's achievements can be counted the slaying of the Dragon of Black Peak with his Axe of Dargo, an enormous runic weapon made from the remnants of the axe of King Baragor, and tempered with dragon's blood and oaths of vengeance. With a heavy blow, he cleaved off the beast's head, to be counted among the few with the title Dragon Slayer. Furthermore, in the Battle of High Pass, he held back the forces of chaos from reaching the World's Edge Mountains until the arrival of forces from the Empire. Leading from the front, not even demons could penetrate his sturdy shield wall, and Ungrim himself sent many of the assailants back to the Reau.
It is time to fulfill your oaths made in Karak Kadrin.
Ungrim is famous for defeating Golgfig Man-Eater, the most legendary of all ogre mercenaries, and the largest, smartest, ugliest, and the loudest ogre in living memory, whose reputation led to all ogre captains to adopting his pseudonym, the Man-Eater, afterwards. In the year 2510 of the Imperial calendar, Ungrim's armies marched out once again, this time in order to defeat the host of Nashrak Badtooth, who had been raiding dwarf lands, having eluded the dwarf armies sent by the High King for decades. Ungrim and the war boss met 3 times near the Broken Leg Gully, and 3 times were the greenskin hosts routed. But their retreat each time was covered by the tough and hardy ogre mercenary regiment of Golgfig Man-Eater. Each time, the orcs could regroup and continue to rampage the dwarf lands. This was only ended when the ogre mercenaries fell out with their employers and defected. They then turned to the dwarves offering their services. As proof of their loyalty, Golgfag brought Nashrak's arm. Guided by Golgfig, Ungrim's men marched through a little-known pass and ambushed the greenskins. Without ogre support, the combined dwarf and ogre host decimated Nashrak's army forever. The treasonous mercenaries, however, looted the dwarf baggage train and treasury after taking their payment. Furious, Ungrim did not forget this treachery, and 5 years later took his chance when Golgfig was crossing the Peak Pass, running just beneath Karak Kadrin in order to loot a transport of ale. Although Golgfig had more ogres than Ungrim had slayers, Ungrim's men proved their prowess and massacred the ogres with deadly blows and skill at arms. Golgfig was captured by Ungrim himself, properly beaten and thrown into a dungeon to rot. In an act of gratitude and generosity, Thorgrim Grudgebearer gifted Ungrim the dragon cloak of Firescar, a cloak made of the scales of the dragon Firescar, a descendant of the infamous Skaladrak, a creature that alone could kill entire armies. The cloak became a royal symbol of the kings of Karak Kadrin, both a dragon slayer and demon slayer. Ungrim Ironfist is one of the most feared dwarf warriors alive, but also one of the dwarves' greatest kings. Despite constantly seeking death, he has lived longer than any other Slayer king and continues to do so. Yet none doubt that his long-awaited rest is soon to come in glorious battle. Yet, of all the Slayers in history, there is no one that can match the incredible feats made by Gotrek Gurnisson. It is unknown what led Gotrek to take the Slayer Oath, but it is proven that he is a monster slayer without peer. Carrying a battle axe containing powerful magic, it is said that Gotrek's weapon is equal to that of the High King Thorgrim himself, in terms of quality and craftsmanship. Warlords, giant creatures, dragons, sorcerers, vile seers, hordes of orcs and goblins, vampire lords, and even greater demons have all been victims of Gotrek's axe. As the famous slayer carves his bloody path towards a glorious death that seems to never come. All of Gotrek's adventures are recorded by his human companion named Felix Jaeger. The duo has faced countless dangers and enemies all across the old world. Their deeds are too numerous, and their story is one that we will explore deeper in a future video.
Slayers! I hear your howls of longing, desperate to be about this, to plunge your axes into the chaos scum before us. So, go, bring me victory! Bring me death!
As the dwarves' race faces a slow and seemingly inevitable extinction, more and more dwarves take the pilgrimage to Karak Kadrin to become slayers, and go to the wilderness to face an epic death, worthy of songs and scriptures. As the world becomes more of a grim place, and the darkest days of their race approach, the slayers will be the last ones fighting, always seeking the most powerful foes to land that final blow that will free them from their heavy burdens.
On this channel, we are putting together narrative Total War cinematic battles and Warhammer lore videos. A special thank you goes to our Patreon supporters who help us in the making of more content. You can also directly support the channel through Patreon. Find the link in the description below. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification button to be the first to watch the next video. Thank you for watching and see you on the next one.